over the world.
My
We're all
God,
over the world.
I
You know,
didn't
I'm in
expect
your,
this.
yeah, I told you you had some fans.
I just had a
I
few, yeah.
Yeah, quite a few.
Mm,
I'm in your neck of the woods, but
mm,
everybody else is all over
mm.
America.
That's amazing. That really is. Well, I hope you find my stories a bit interesting. I tell you, but
Of course.
when I met James, like we didn't stop talking, did I? At the fantasy convention, that was really good fun, actually. I did something yesterday, actually. There was a Bond movie. Well, I worked on about six of them. License to Kill, the last Timothy Dalton one, and it was the 35th anniversary screening at the Prince Charles in Leicester Square. I attended that, and then did a little bit of a talk for at the Hippodrome Casino as well about my involvement in it, and that was great fun. I didn't get home till
Um,
late.
Prince Charles Theater is great. It's kind of like your
Mm.
theater, Helene, in Portland. Um, oh, it plays like Hocus Pocus, Shock Treatment. They played Shock Treatment one year. Billy the Kid and
Mm.
the Green Bay's Vampire, Rocky Horror, all those things.
Oh, I worked on that. Mm.
You worked on what?
Yeah, yeah, Billy the Kid. I vaguely remember that. Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire.
Oh my God. I have been
Yeah,
trying,
I
and we'll
forgot
get
about
into
that.
everything, but I've been
Yeah.
trying to push that musical forever. And I tell people it's like Dracula
Mm,
meets Shock Treatment because it actually has the
mm,
same feel as Shock Treatment.
Yeah, well, I can't remember it that well, but my God, yeah, I did some work on it when I was at GSE. Um, uh, who was it? Not who was in it? Who was in it? Who was in
The
it?
guy from
Um,
Quadrophenia, Phil
Phil
Daniels.
Daniels. That's it, Phil Daniels. That was it. Yeah, yeah. I remember a bit of it. Yeah. God, those were the days. The 80s was incredible for me. Really was, because that's when I started in the industry in 1981, December the 7th, I think it was, 1981. And I was just thrown into this world of it was opticals in those days, no CGI, optical visual effects, and you were so heavily involved, in the post-production side, and you got to see all the directors. That's another one I did as well, Company of Wolves. I didn't mention that one as well. I worked on that one. That was the first one. But my biggest film, first biggest film, was a movie called Krull.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, you remember that, yeah? Yeah, because that
Yes.
didn't do too well. That didn't do too well, but that was a film I learned a lot of my trade on that one. We did a lot of work with the fire mares, and also the title with the blade coming on. That artwork and animation, which I did at GSE, composited in traditionally on the optical camera. And I think the difficult one was the flame on the hand, where I don't know if it's Lisa Anthony or something, and it flies off. But that was a quite a tough one, actually. And PT Yates was the director, and he used to come in every Saturday because I had to work around the clock on that show, to check to see if I was doing his film or another film, because I was doing a couple of shows at the same time. But I learned a lot then, and then I ended up working for several years at Derek Medding's Magic Camera Company back in late 80s after I finished Bond, because he was a supervisor on it. But yeah, that was quite a tough show, to be honest. But I have to admit, one of your pictures of Edgar, Electric Dreams, I loved working on that. I absolutely loved working on
And
that.
that's
That
why
was.
we're going to go around because I want to
Oh,
say
I bet
our
you. I
niche.
better let you start. You should ask the questions, really, because I'll
No,
go on
I
and
was
on
going
and
to
on.
say our
I'm so
niches.
sorry.
Our niches
Hmm.
are cult musicals, and you've worked on two of the biggest cult musicals of all time, Labyrinth and Darren's favorite film, Little Shop of Horrors. But
Yeah, I
also you've
loved it.
worked
I
on,
loved that film. Yeah. Mm,
and he'll have a lot of questions for you, but you've also
mm,
worked on
mm.
really iconic films of our childhood, The Neverending Story 2, which I actually prefer to the first. And
You get
like I
really,
Well,
really.
and I'll just say
Zaida.
because of the book. I grew up with the book, and the
Oh,
second movie
right.
covers the rest of the book. And the second half of the book
Mm,
of the Neverending Story is where Zaire and all those come. And you've also did
mm,
Return to Oz, which is iconic film of my childhood.
Right, you're
And
saying that. Yeah, yeah, Walter Murch is going around the country, isn't he, with his film at the moment.
oh,
He's made a film about cutting on moviolas on the traditional way, and
Oh,
he's presenting the film at the St Albans Odyssey Cinema. So I'm just going to try and get to that in September.
I'll try to go as well. And of course, one of John's favorites, Muppet Treasure Island, and Hades and Mary's favorite.
Got lots of stories on Muppet Treasure Island. Loved it. Yeah,
I
loved
still
it.
have the autograph you gave me. It was really sweet. I don't know if you can see it. It's the
Um,
Return to Oz poster that you signed for me, and I thought it was really sweet.
oh,
But I
oh,
won't
thank you.
dote on
Thank
you
you.
too much or blabber too much because all of my co-hosts have a special affinity to one or many of your films. So I'm gonna let
Hmm.
them ask you questions about
Hmm.
the films and any other questions they have. So who would like to go first? Because I know y'all have lots of
Hmm.
stories or lots of questions you have to ask.
Yeah, and if we run out of time, we can always do a part two and a part three and a part four. So don't worry about that.
All right. How about Darren? Ask. Go ahead, Darren.
well, I would start by saying this is kind of a two for one because Little Shop of Horrors is one of my favorite movie musicals. And then when I found out that you worked on Return to Oz, that's one of my childhood favorites. I'm one of the Ozians. So this is kind of amazing to be able to speak with you right now.
Oh, it's
So
just me.
this goes back
But I'm
so
a film buff. Remember one thing, you're all talking to me. I feel exactly the same as you. So I fought to get in the industry and I got in and I remember, I treasure every moment of my career, especially in the 80s.
okay.
So it's great. Sorry.
And you said that the 80s was really good to you. So, because Return
Mhm,
to Oz came before Little Shop, we'll get to that later. I
mhm.
want to know what was it like when you found out that you were going to work on Return to Oz? Because it had been rumored for years that they were going to do a sequel, and then there was the animated show with Liza
Mm,
Minnelli. So,
mm.
what did it feel like to you when you found out that you were going to work on Return to Oz?
Well, I think you probably had a lot more background information than I did on the Return to Oz. But when I heard I was going to work on an Oz movie for Disney, I was very excited. Now, the reason why, because I worked at a company called General Screen Enterprises, and you can see the credit at the end of the show. Now, it was in those days, apart from ILM, the Star Wars, people that of my kind, like optical camera and visual effects cameramen, didn't get credits. So the company got a credit. So we got a call from Oz Productions, and I think the editor was Leslie Hodgson or something. There was a company at Pinewood under contract to do the visual effects called Optical Film Effects. Now, they were not delivering the shots as quickly and as efficiently as they were hoping. So it was decided then that Oz Productions would look into another visual effects company. So they contacted General Screen Enterprises, my company, the company I work for. And as soon as I heard from the MD that Oz Productions, Walt Disney, productions wanted us to do the work. I jumped at it because there were probably about four optical cameramen, camera people at GSE, and I was always the most enthusiastic, probably the most naive in a way because I had to work late hours and I didn't mind doing that because I was absolutely mad on films, and I wanted to work with Walter Murch. So I immediately put my hand up, and the first shot or sequence I had to do was the transition from Oz to Kansas at the end, when she said, "There's no place like home," or whatever she said, and she's right, and everything goes bright and gets all shiny and ripply and all of that. Now that looked like quite a simple mix, just a mixed white but it was very complicated because I had to hold the exposure of Dorothy and Ozma and TikTok and whatever, and bring in percentage mixes, and it took forever because it was such a long sequence. They loved it. They absolutely loved it. But then I had to then do the reverse. Then I had to go back to the beginning of the show and say, well, we've got the other sequence, with all the lightning effects that we had to do and everything, going into the cage that she was in. And she was traveling. That was a transition, traveling to Oz. Now that they love that, and then as a result of that, and next time, let's say there's another next time. There's a next time because I can. There's one photograph of me, and I haven't got it with me at the moment. I've got to dig it out. I did as a charity event a bed race in the place where we were in the town we were called Uxbridge, and there's a photograph of me next to my optical camera, dressed as the Tin Man, because we got a lot of publicity material from Disney and everything, and we did an Oz bed race, so to speak. So I was mad on it, absolutely mad on it. But we then got instructions from Oz Productions, and again I've got this house note somewhere because I never throw anything away. Massive order, saying that they like our work so much that they decided to move the majority of work, the rest of the work, over to us. So I ended up doing, and I still say to this day, because I'm still doing the job now, visual effect, I do supervision and producing now for movies and TV. So, but some of the best work I've ever done as an optical cameraman, with Little Shop of Horrors as well, and Electric Dreams. There's loads of stories on Electric Dreams. I did the Gnome King composites into the cliff face, where was it the bed thing? Gump, was it the Gump? Comes crashing down onto the cliff face, and the Gnome King starts developing out the cliff face, which was stop frame animation. So I put all of that in, put some additional snow, which I shot, which was salt. We shot salt on the stage and then ran it high speed and everything. So all of that was putting that together on the optical camera. And they like that as well. So I ended up doing a lot more of the transitions when those green ornaments were being changed in the cave, Oz, and they were going back to the characters. When the Gnome King was changing back to a stop frame gnome. So I did a lot of work, and I have to admit, I was then invited to the cast and crew screening on a Sunday, and that was at the Leicester Square Theatre in Leicester Square. It was a 1,400 seater cinema, but it had they blew the film up to 70mm for the presentation, and it was 6 magnetic soundtrack. Now, if you've not heard that on a film, it is unbelievable. It is warm, it is bassy, the depth of it, it's stunning. Now, the film was 185, it was white mask, so it wasn't, it wasn't full widescreen, but it was masked 185, but the sound was incredible. Now, I remember a load of kids were screaming at the cast and crew, and they got taken out because at the bit with, when Princess Mombi, and this is another shot of mine, Dorothy, you go with the head. That whole sequence was me as well, and kids were screaming and screaming. I've never heard the likes of. It was incredible. But
I gotta ask, did you realize how terrifying this was while you were making it?
No,
because this movie absolutely terrifies the shit out of me, and I'm 47.
Really?
I'm just saying, this movie is so fucking scary. Oh my God.
That scene he's talking about, where like she's trying to get the key from Mumby's, like that's
it.
That's
it. Yeah, that's my sequence.
It's just a combination of everything, like the acting, but also like the lighting, the cinematography, but also like just that music when that
David Watkin or Mandy Watkin, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when we first started talking and we first met, Mary said, "Holy shit, Return to Oz was crazy."
Yes, Ken, with the wheelies. Can we talk about the wheelies? They were so.
The Wheelers. Did you work with the Wheelers, Alan? The men with the
No,
wheels
but I
on
met
their...
a couple. No, I met a couple because then following on from the cast and crew, I think it was like 2 weeks later or something, I went to the premiere and I met Firuza and Jean Marsh, and I got her autograph. I've still got that. And they painted the Yellow Brick Road in Leicester Square. And they had a couple of wheelers escorting us, and they said, "This way to the Yellow Brick Road, this way to the Land of Oz." It was just mad. It was, but I tell
I
you
just
what, it scared the shit out
struggle
of
thinking.
me when you added the sound to it, because I work quite often without sound. You know, I do a lot of the visuals, and I don't hear much of the sound until I see it at the cinema. So when you get the final mix together with the visuals and superb editing, I thought Return to Oz was bloody scary. It was a U certificate, as I remember, as well. It was unbelievable, and I loved it. I
You
absolutely loved it. I went to see it many times, but I was really a bit pissed off. And it is a good film. But across the road in Leicester Square, across the way, Back to the Future was coming on. So Back to the Future was stealing a lot of the box office receipts, but it did well in England compared to America. Mm.
I was gonna say, before U certificate in England is like rated G in America. So that's but I think I remember the first thing I asked you when we were talking, Alan, when I met you at the convention was, I think you said Perusa was really sweet. I asked how she was, and you said that
Lovely.
she was.
Absolutely delightful. Again, what I'll do is let's do this as a part one and a part two. Part two, I'll be more organised and I'll find a couple of photographs that I took at the premiere. And I've got one of Feruza and things. And what I'll do is I'll be just think of this as an intro because I love talking about movies. And I've so just moved house, so there are boxes of stuff everywhere. I actually found Zaida, huge transparency of Zaida. You know that it's stunning quality. I found that the other day. So there's loads, you know, there's lots of part twos and threes if you don't find me, you know, boring and think, oh, go away.
Of course
But,
not. Before we move on from
but
Return to Oz and go to Little Shop,
yeah.
does anybody have any Return to Oz, any further Return to Oz questions before we move into Little Shop?
Where do I send the bill for my childhood trauma?
Not to me, I tell you a worse film than that. I hope you didn't see a movie called 1984.
Oh my!
That was
I
George Orwell thing. That they called an ambulance at the cast and crew at the premiere for that. It's so dark because it was the one with Richard Burton and John Hurt and Susanna
Yeah.
Hamilton. I did a load of work on that one, but that's another story. But
And Life
that's
Force.
a
We
dark
did Life
film.
Force, which talk about dark and weird. Life Force.
Oh, I did large
It's not a
format
cult
on Life
musical,
Force.
so I know
Yes.
it's probably for like we need to do like another podcast, like a spin-off that's like the cult musical adjacent kind of
Yeah.
thing. Because Life Force belongs in an
Mhm.
adjacent podcast, but
That's
that one,
mad. That was
but
insane.
yeah.
So before we
Still
move on from
vampires
Return
was
to Oz,
original.
I will say that one of my goals while I'm here in England is to go to where they filmed Return to Oz to make it look like Kansas. It was like in the middle of nowhere, England, and I'll have to figure it out where it is. So
Is that
like
near
they made it
Milton Keynes? I can't remember. Was it Milton Keynes or something?
maybe, and you can see the asylum because it was an old house or something.
Oh, really? I'd
But
like to see
Return
that.
to Oz is great, and we love it, and it deserves its just due. So let's
Love
move
it.
into our other favorite, which is Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh,
So tell us
yes,
about
yes.
Little Shop of Horrors, and then we'll ask some questions about Little Shop of Horrors. How did you get that
Okay.
call?
So how'd I got that? So in those days there was like one producer on a film. Nowadays you have 8 producers and so many execs and all of this and all of that. So that will limit you to getting regular work from your clients. Now, there was an editor who I did so much work for, and he was such a lovely man. There were some horrible people, which we'll talk another time, but not on this show. There was an editor called Johnny Jimpson. Now, Johnny Jimpson, I'd worked on many shows in the 80s, and his favorite cutting rooms were at Twickenham Studios. So although the film Little Shop was shot at Pinewood, they edited a lot of it at Pinewood, and then they moved to Twickenham because Twickenham was good for a sound thing. Now, Johnny Jimpson obviously doing Little Shop of Horrors and said, would you like to do some work on it? And I said, yes, of course. Frank Oz, the Muppets. I'll tell you one thing about the Muppets as well, but I'm going to quickly, 30 seconds, give me 30 seconds or a minute. Before I started in the industry in the 70s, my mum was teaching a cameraman's son. My mum was a teacher, and his name was Bill Brown. And Bill Brown was one of the cameramen at ATV Studios in Boreham Wood Hart for Lou Grade. And I went to see the Muppets show being filmed, the opening sequence, the theatre bit. And I saw Frank Oz, and I saw Jim Henson, and he did 24 takes on one setup. I was transfixed, and I knew then that I wanted to work on the Muppets. I ended up doing a bit of work on Muppets Take Manhattan, Muppet Christmas Carol, and I did a load of work on Muppet Treasure Island, which I'm very proud of. But anyway, so all of that was building me up to get into the industry. But anyway, so Frank Oz, got to meet the man, John Jimpson, brilliant. So I was instructed and given these sequences to do, and I can't remember, it was an egg timer sequence with Rick Moranis running past. So I did that, and also the bit where the three singers, the Ronettes and Chiffon, or what they're called, and there's the American flag at the background where they come along at the end. So I did that, and also then I was asked to do some of the sequence for the plant taking over the world, some of the optical comps. Sorry?
The proper ending, I might add.
Yeah, agree.
Yes.
It was so bad.
Yeah, and I tell you what, that would have won an Oscar for visual effects that year if that was left in. Now I actually was told, because a lot of it was just magical seeing this. It was just unbelievable. I love the music. I've been to the theatre to seen it so many times. I saw it once with Ellen Green. And then I saw it with me and my partner. I treated him to the open theatre in Regent's Park. They do a lot of Shakespearean plays, but they did a version of Little Shop of Horrors, the musical, and it was brilliant. They had this massive drag queen as Audrey too, and it was fantastic. Everybody was, up dancing and shit. It was fantastic. I've got photos of that as well. I loved it. But anyway, getting back to that, I was hearing when I used to go to the cutting rooms, they were laying down the tracks with some of the songs, and I was absolutely fascinated. Now, I didn't do anything on the Steve Martin, so that was a bit of a surprise when I saw that on the final at the cast and crew screening. But I was so pleased with that, and then came John Jimpson said, we've just had a screening in America, and it didn't go down too well, the ending, excuse me, because what wasn't liked at that time, I know it's different nowadays, but the plant destroyed the Statue of Liberty and everything that was true American. It left the film on a bit of a downer, and the audience didn't like that at that time. So in the end, they electrocuted and blew up the plant, which was a real shame. But the one thing I did have is that I know, or he's not with us now, there's a cameraman, a visual effects cameraman called Paul Wilson. Now, Paul Wilson used to work a lot with Derek Meddings, and I worked with Derek on a few shows, Cape Fear and whatever. But Paul Wilson, I went round his house when I was first buying my house in Windsor, and he said to me, he said, would you be interested in this? And I said, what? He said, well, you absolutely love Little Shop of Horrors. He said, before the film was reshot and cut, I've got a VHS here of the original ending. Now, I had that as a rough cut for donkey's years, but I couldn't say that I had it. Now, then I heard that it was it Goober Peters? Geffen, sorry, the Geffen company, David Geffen, had this huge political problem because they were going to re-release it, but I think David Geffen wasn't allowing it, and I think they had a legal wrangle problem with Warner Brothers, and it was just shelved for decades. But then it came out on Blu-ray, and seeing it again, it just brought back so many memories. I absolutely love that film, and it's so nice to do a musical because you don't do many of those. And but again, with that movie, as with Oz, it was blown up to 70mm and 6-track magnetic. Now, That was shown, and I saw it about 7 or 8 times at one cinema at the Warner West End. And the Warner West End in those days were 2 screens, and it was equipped for 70 millimeter. It was 890 seats, this screen, and it had acoustic cones from the ceiling. And it was the first cinema in Europe to be certified with THX sound. And Little Shop of Horrors was the first film to be shown in that cinema in THX. Now, again, if you've heard the gimmick sense around, you know, from the date of Earthquake and whatever, this was truly incredible, absolutely incredible, and it just blew me away. So I then, not only did I get to the cast and crew screening and a couple of other previews, I then chatted up the projectionist there because I wanted to go to every preview that was going. So I ended up seeing that film a lot. And I'd love to see again a 70mm print of it. I know there's one that still exists because I think the Prince Charles showed it about 4 years ago in 70mm.
Alan, were you able to meet any of the cast?
No, I didn't. That was a shame, but I went on the set, which was by the near the 007 stage where that was. Now, the interesting thing on that, which was great, it was stunning. But what I found really sad, and I may have mentioned this to you, Jones, I can't remember, but every time I used to go to Pinewood it was about 4 or 5 years later, on the back lot, there was piles of rubbish. And there was Audrey 2.
Oh,
There was the big Audrey 2 rotting, the massive one. Now, if only I could have taken it. It was there. I swear it was there for years and years and years, and it was just dumped there. Now, this was obviously the days when people didn't collect things or whatever, you know, what I did. I collected a load of things. But I tell you what, I couldn't have got it in my car, but I would have done.
Before I asked my co-host to ask questions about Little Shop, were there any reasons why Jim Henson didn't take it with him?
Well, the only thing I can think of is that there were several versions made. So maybe he did take one version. Now, I don't know what version I saw, but all I did, it was a big mother, not green. It was deteriorating, but it was a mother. It was a big one. But again,
that was a great pun.
No, well, my mate Peter Chang, he got a bloody credit. What annoys me, he got a check because he did the Robin animation. He was working at OFE at the time. He did the Robin animation with Ellen Green, you know, doing that commercial advert, that song, Somewhere That's Green, I think it was, something like that. And he also did the lightning effect that hit the plant when Darum, that sequence as well. But I know of maybe a couple of people that still have a little plant because there were loads of them. Now, I will never get my hands on it, and it's a huge regret. But what I still have to this day are good memories, and I still have my cast and crew tickets, which are 3D tickets. You lifted up again. Next time I'll show you it. I might have a spare one. You can fight amongst yourselves. I might be able to give you one of them, whoever wants it. But it's you lift it up, you know, the mouth up, and there it says invites 2 people to the special screening of Little Shop of Horrors. But I'll dig that out anyway because I've got a couple. I'll just bear with me, but I have got a spare one somewhere.
Got a big blank wall behind you. I'm foreseeing, like, you know, next time we talk to you, that's going to just be covered with framed things from your stories.
And you're just going to have a pointer.
Yeah, so what I've got.
Yeah,
so what I've
laser
got.
pointer going, yeah.
Again, it's just basically I've just moved in, but I'll show you on the phone. I'm just putting up at the moment downstairs. It's from Russia with Love. That's an original from Russia with Love.
Yes.
And that's a special premiere German poster for the Smile Over Me. So I've got masses. Hold on a minute. Hold on. Just stay there. Just stay there. Stay there.
Yeah, I think I remember when he told me that Audrey was like rotting, and I'm like, that's kind of poetic because John and everyone, I love the happy ending.
I actually do. How could you do this to me, James?
Yeah. I am a lover of happy endings.
How could you love this happy ending?
I'm all for happy ending because like life is shit and we need stuff to escape it. But like the original ending is poetic. Come on, it makes sense.
Give us
He's
the
getting us
option for
something.
both.
What is that?
Oh God, he's got the box.
Well, this
Box.
is one of my many boxes of my past. So in here, so I'll get this out of the way. But I'll just show you.
And James can go see this. None of us can come see this, so it's like you're torturing us. Thanks.
First of all, James saw this, the Orin.
The Orin!
Oh wow!
Remember that?
Nice.
Yeah, that's from the number 2. Then I've got Wads of Money from License to Kill because we were shooting
By
that
the
in the
way,
title.
By the way, I just want to say, License to Kill and Timothy Dalton as Bond are both incredibly underrated.
Brilliant, brilliant. I saw it again yesterday at the cinema. Got applause. It was sold out. It was absolutely sold out, the performance. There you go. Because I did the gun barrel on the title sequences on that. But anyway, so after that. But then, quickly, James, and then we better go back onto Little Shop of Horrors.
Alan, since you did the gun barrel animation for License to Kill, did you also do it for GoldenEye?
No, I didn't. That was CGI. I did the last traditional because I was Maurice Binder's assistant.
Okay.
The original title designer. So I was
I saw
proud
you
to say
that. I wanted to show off. I saw you worked on GoldenEye.
I worked on GoldenEye. I worked on GoldenEye. I did a lot on that.
Yeah, and this is a copy of the DVD that I got from when our local video store closed down. So this was bought on clearance.
Wow. Good one. I was first week. I did a lot of the miniatures with Derek Reddings. Right, I better show you quickly, and then I better stop this. These are I've got all my dope sheets for Neverending Story 2 animations.
Wow.
So I've got all my settings. It's Princess Ida's demise. I've got boxes of it all. Optical, right? The Smurg continues to form sequence there. So anyway, so I suppose I'm digressing.
No, we will talk about those other films in a minute. But do you guys, my Little Shop fans, those in costume and Dare and everyone, do you have any more questions for Alan about Little Shop? If he has any memories or anything?
John, go.
The first thing, many of us are part of Rocky Horror Shadow casts, and my cast in particular put on Little Shop. 2 times I played John Candy's character, then the next 2 times I played Mr. Mushnick. But that's just I had to mention that or else my brain would have exploded. But the one thing I wanted to ask was, can you describe what it's like to work with Frank Oz in general? Like you mentioned working with him with this movie. Did he visit you guys often, like as you were getting things done in post-production? Did he meet with you guys before and saying, this is what we're looking for? Like how hands-on was he involved with post-production stuff?
He knew what he wanted. He exactly knew what he wanted. Now I met him because the shoot was very long actually. I met him towards the end of the shoot and I met him in the editorial for the simple reason because there was an infrastructure in those days and a hierarchy. Far more now it's like that, the editors used to wear jacket and tie and I never used to go there in shorts. It was treated a lot differently then, and I was obviously invited to work on the show by John Jimson, the editor. So it was through him that I met Frank Oz, and that was in the cutting rooms. Now, Frank, I thought he was fantastic. His voice fascinated me, absolutely fascinated me. You can close your eyes and you think, he's some other character, that you remember for years. But he knew what he wanted, but he trusted you. So he would say he would run the piece of film saying, and in those days, there was no Avid, there was no video or anything, so it was purely showing you on a Moviola or on a Steambet, which are editing tools, and they were showing you various layers. So you had a synchronizer. I don't know if you've seen a synchronizer where you run film through, and you've got like 6 different cogs really where the film goes through and a counter. Now when you're overlaying an effect, you are given in those days, you were given the components, say, right, work it out. What can you do? Can you do this? Can you do that? What else can you do? So you were given like 6 layers of film for a composite or a dream sequence or something. And you would and what would happen is that the director would come in and say, "Hi, Alan, you know, I want to show you the one piece of film. So I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. Now, what do you think you could do for this? What could you shoot some of this for us? Could you shoot some of that?" And the problem I had is that I was so much in awe. I was remembering I was, you know, a lad. My dad was a fireman, mum was a teacher. I was in awe of all of these people. You know, I never thought I'd meet all of these. So I was thinking, oh my God, I'm with this person, I'm with Frank Oz, I'm with this. And they was talking and talking, and they said, "Have you got that, Alan?" And I said, "Yes." But I was thinking more, I was in this situation with these people. No, you end up, and then you then talk to the editor again, and you start piecing it together. So in terms of Frank Oz, he knew what he wanted. You know, it's like going back to when I saw the Muppet Show being filmed. I've never in my at that time they were so meticulous. You know, 25 takes for one setup. Now, you know, but then when I got to know about the Hensons and I got to know Brian Henson on Muppets, they always used to do the last take. They used to call it, right, we'll do one for fun. One take for fun. It was like, right, we'll do the one for fun now. One take for fun. Now that was normally the one that they used. It was incredible. It was like everything else was a rehearsal in the end, but there was always that one at the end, one for fun. And I was absolutely amazed. And then when I became involved in Treasure Island and going on set and seeing the rushes, you know, meeting Tim Curry, and then on the Muppet Christmas Carol meeting Michael Caine, it was just an incredible experience. But my God, are they professional? So sorry, the long question is, he knew what he wanted. He didn't know how to get it because that wasn't his experience. But he trusted people. You know, it's like the plant. I think they undercranked the plant. You know, that was probably somebody else's idea, so they could get the lip sync with Levi Stubbs and all of that to move so quickly. But he was like well, he was like a god, really. You know, he was a director, like, incredibly respected. You know, and then I didn't work on it, but I saw him again at the premiere for Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. He directed that. And I haven't seen him since. You know, I didn't see him on Muppet. Did he? Was he on Muppet Treasure Island? He was, wasn't he?
I believe so.
Okay. A little bit. I don't think he was on a huge amount.
I think maybe around that time he wasn't really doing the performing. He was still
doing the voiceovers.
Yeah, doing the voiceovers.
Doing the voiceovers. Yeah. But because I don't remember seeing him on set on that. But yeah, Frank Oz was just brilliant.
Do you guys, I know you all love Little Shop. So before we move on, do you guys have any more Little Shop questions for Alan about anything in terms of the logistics or anything about the feel of the set or his favorite memory or anything?
Set was brilliant, by the way. That street was amazing.
I will say that Little Shop of Horrors means a lot to a lot of my co-hosts, and so I'm so glad I get to share this moment with them because, you know, Little Shop is still one of those, even though it's, you know, mainstream, it's still very underrated. And I still feel like it hasn't got its just due. So maybe.
Yeah. No, you're very right. And I remember the box office receipts went very good in 1986. I think the total was like 33 million, which wasn't a lot. And then it just disappeared. and of course now with Blu-rays and everything and the special editions, it's got cult status, and it deserves more than that, to be honest. It really does.
It does.
In fact, it was re-released at the cinema, wasn't it, for one day only a few weeks ago on one of the cinema chains. Yeah, Cineworld. They released a load of 80s films, and it was one of the films that they were showing.
Segue into 80s films. Can you tell us how you got involved in Labyrinth?
Right, I didn't do right. So please be aware, I didn't do much on Labyrinth. Right, So, Labyrinth came up. Oh God, who was the editor? Was it John Grover? I can't remember who the editor was. But there was. I knew loosely Jim Henson's Creature Shop, and I think it was John Stevenson or something. But there was this rough composite needed to be done just to see if the animation worked because they were shot separately, and there were these fairies. And it's the fairies that come up, fly up towards camera,
Mhm.
and then
And they
fly
put
off.
them-
Now,
Yeah.
yeah, so the wings were separate, completely separate to the bodies of the characters. I had to attach them optically. Now, so they get so it's this usual thing, right, Alan? Here you go. There you go. Can you make it work? It's literally, I was only in my 20s, but they give you right, just make it work. And then you've got the film coming out. I went to the casting with just a couple of weeks later the film, but it was just right. You've got to make it work. You haven't got any time to do it, and you work night and day. So I had to synchronize up each of the fairy wings, which was very difficult because remembering there's no CGI, so tracking that in was difficult. So you were looking at a little viewer like that with your film, and you were moving with your dials thousandths of an inch. Again, next time I'll show you a photograph. In fact, you can see these if you type in optical printer on YouTube, you'll see the contraption where visual effects were composited in those days. And it's can I swear here? It's a bit of a mindfuck.
Oh yeah.
It's absolutely huge. It's a massive it's a massive flatbed thing that's probably about 10 to 15 foot wide, depending on the side, with like a camera there, loads of dials and things, and whatever fade mechanisms, a projector there with more reels of film that you sandwich together, another projector there and another projector, and you sandwich all your elements together on one piece of film. Now it sounds really easy, but it isn't, because you have to extract the blue screen from it, you have to do this and that. But anyway, so that with the wings, I had to move separately. So I give them the wing element, and then when you look at the wing element, then you have to move it to create another new element, frame by frame, to match the movement of the fairies. Then you had to make another matte component from that, and then I had to do that many times. It was tough. Did it in the end, but the one thing I did do is I made a huge mistake. Is I got them out of sync on the first time, synchronized by about 15 frames, 10, 15 frames. So the fairies came in, and then the wings were chasing after separately the fairies. But yeah, that was my only experience on Labyrinth, unfortunately. But I got to the cast and crew, and which was wonderful. That was at the I've got my ticket of that somewhere as well, at the Odeon Leicester Square. But unfortunately, it didn't do massively well. But I thought it was excuse me, magical, absolutely magical.
It was magical, and it has it's a huge cult thing now. And this is my only question about Labyrinth. Were you ever able to see Jennifer Connelly or David Bowie?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. I would love to have seen David Bowie. I love that song with something with a babe. That one, I love that song. I think it is utterly brilliant. Now, I worked with David Bowie's son. To had a good chat with him when I was in Berlin. I started off doing a movie called Mute, which I didn't end up doing, so I took another show in place. But I spent time with David Bowie's son. Now, what's his name?
Zoe?
He did
Duncan. Duncan.
Duncan, that's it. And he's got a pendant he was given to him. And Duncan was just a charming, lovely man. You would never have thought his father was David Bowie, and we had a lovely chat with him. But no, I never met David Bowie, which was a real shame. But missed out on that one. But no, Labyrinth was. I didn't do a huge lot on it, but I did that sequence.
But the fairy sequence is great because it looks amazing, and it looks like it was done amazing. Does anybody have any questions about that Labyrinth sequence before we move on to other films that are non-musical?
I mean, I'd like to just bring up the fact that, like, I love that we're actually talking to you, because we've interviewed like writers, directors, which is all well and good, but to actually have somebody that worked on special effects, on opticals in the 1980s, to me, that's what got me into. I went to film school. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen an optical printer, and that thing is a monster.
Scary, isn't it?
It took up a room. And I mean, this was like the early 2000s. It was like a museum piece because we were already but
it's incredible. The optics on it are absolutely amazing. Now, you always had a bloody problem as well, is that everything, when you're doing your maths, you know, 30, 40 passes, you're on your own. You know, everybody's finished the movies and they're waiting for you. So all the focus, you know, it's only getting 10 grand or 14 grand or whatever. But everybody had gone home, finished. They were just waiting for you to give the final shots in for the film. And you had a premiere in a week's time. And sometimes, like with Aliens, I had a nervous breakdown on Aliens because I was producing the lightning effects for the Alien, for the second one when the mother came around the lift and all of that. And then I was also doing the entire, which was a problem with James Cameron. But I had a breakdown because, you know, I had to deliver it. I had to ring the labs up the road, Rank Labs in Denham, to keep the processing bath open for me to finish at 1 in the morning to then can it up. I had no runners in those days. I was the only one in the building. Lock up the building, put the alarm on, drive up to Denham, put my film in, wake up at 6 in the morning. So I only had a few hours sleep. When I didn't sleep anyway, I was too scared. To look at it, take it over to Technicolor, it was, because they were blowing it up, the negative, up to 70 millimeter for the cast and crew screening at the early Marble Arch on the Tuesday. It was a nightmare. But I tell you what, it's the best training. So I appreciate you knowing about optical printers. I do for everyone else. I would really recommend you have a look at them. And you know, there's this great ILM. What does piss me off about ILM is everything's about ILM. It's like they're the only people that did all of this. Not at all. We were doing it at Derek Meddings. We were doing miniatures. We were shooting miniatures. We were doing stop frame animation for Never Ending Story. All of this stuff, and we were compositing it in. But they were good at self promotion, and they had good lawyers, so they got credits as optical camera or optical printer operators. Now it scared me as a youngster. Because I wouldn't have getting films, and although I thought, well, films just happen, just put shots together. I don't know how it worked. You know, how did the gun barrel work? It just looked great, all of that. And then I was shown this machine, and I thought, how on earth am I going to pick this up? But you have the little traits, and again, I can go into further detail another time on the specifics of that. But,
I mean, I can talk to you for hours on this, but it's just more or less.
You will do, I hope.
You made a great point. You made a great point about ILM, like taking sort of like basically being like, we're number one, we do everything. But like, what I love the fact that you brought up the company that you work for is that in the UK, especially at the time when so many American films were being shot in the UK for tax incentive, that had boutiques like the company that you worked for that, you know, just you did your part and you had to do it, you know, pardon my, you know, the pun here, but like under the gun. And
very much so.
The work that you've done for like the James Bond openings, or you know, even just like compositing lightning. Like, I think today we take for granted just the amount of work that had to go into this. With, you know, not to say rudimentary, but it was the technology of the time before this big CGI boom in like the late 80s, early 90s. So like again, like I tip my hat to you for all the amazing works that you know you did. It truly is. It's underappreciated.
It's organic. It's organic. You can touch it. You know, we can do it now. I think CGI's gone overboard. It's too much.
Yeah.
It's too much. If I was offered to do a Marvel movie, I wouldn't do it. I really wouldn't do it.
They abuse their people.
Well, speaking of abuse, I had a question about James Cameron. I mean, did you ever get any? Because I heard that he was extremely difficult to work with for the British crew on Aliens. So I was wondering if did you experience any of that?
Yeah, big time. So what happened was there were probably about 4 companies that were assigned in the UK to do that. It was under contract that there was, and hence the credit. These contracts were very good for America's lawyers, but we didn't have all of that in the UK at that time. So we didn't really get the credits we deserved, although we got a good credit at the end. GSE, General Screen Enterprises. but not my name. I'm in the book though, the big coffee table book now. That's good. But the LA, certain visual effects, the LA effects group were contracted to do a lot of the work. Now, there were about 4 of us. There was Peerless, there was General Screen Enterprises. We did the main bulk in the UK, and Arcodon, I think it was, and Peter Govey. And so what happened was you were given, and quickly on this one, because I know Aliens is not the musical. That would be interesting.
Could be.
Aliens a musical.
Not yet. Someday.
That'll happen.
Could be a music.
That'll happen. But quickly, with James Cameron, he gave me, and he was based at Pinewood in the cutting room, and he was like a teacher. So all the optical houses, reps, and I was the optical cameraman for JSC. Were queuing up outside, and he'd call you into the room, the cutting room. Next, 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 and he was very belittling of whatever the word is. I didn't like him at all. I think the film is stunning. I think it's fantastic. One of the best movies of science fiction to date. Now, he gave me a bloody problem because I liked what I did on Terminator, he said. So he gave me cans of film of the components for the lightning effects from Terminator. Make it work. And that was my brief. And then I had to make those lightning effects, which were obviously designed for Terminator, to make it work for Aliens. And if you're starting from scratch doing the animations, it's bad enough working with Mr. Cameron, but if you're utilizing a component that he knew very well and you had to fit it into, say, going behind the mother alien or something coming out the lift, it was problematic. He wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan personally of James Cameron. I think he's a jackass, but hey.
But we're done with the musical aspects. So that's what I was going to ask. Since we've only talked about your 2 musicals, I was going to ask my co-host to ask about Electric Dreams, Never Ending Story 2, My Week with Marilyn, or any other films that you all wanted to ask
Marilyn
about.
as well, my God, yes.
This is Muppet Treasure Island, Erasure. Yeah, Muppet Treasure Island.
Right.
Did you
Tell us about
your
that,
work
and
on Muppet Treasure
especially
Island?
Tim Curry.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So, I always butt in, by the way. So, right, so I was working at Shepperton Studios at Magic Camera Company. And so, and Muppet Treasure Island came into the studio. So I disappeared quite a lot. And I went on set just to watch them. And I was watching the boat, Hispaniola, or whatever it was called, that galleon boat being shot against blue screen. And so I got just standing there. You know, I worked at M stage at Magic Camera, and this was over at H stage. And I was just standing there, and I got chatting to a supervisor there called Tom Smith, who used to work at ILM. And I was just fascinated, and I was wanting to work on the show. Now, at that time, CGI was coming leaps and bounds, and I thought my days were numbered as an optical cameraman. So I got a job at a company called CineSight, which you may have seen, CineSight, and they were desperate for work. And I managed to get them work on Mission Impossible due to my contacts, and Muppet Treasure Island. So I left Shepperton and I went to CineSight, and they approached Tom and say, I'll be your visual effects producer on at CineSight and supervisor for any work that you give us. And he said, well, I don't like the company. He said, I will send a note to them on the condition that you do oversee everything. And when Brian Henson comes in, or you required on set, you will give us 100% attention. I thought, brilliant. That gives me an opportunity to solely work on the show. So I got work on it. Now, the first thing I had to do was do some of the Hispaniola, because tracking in the C plates was probably not the best thing on that. So we had to rework those plates. And the first whole sequence I was given, and the whole sequence we charged, I think it was about 350 grand on it, was Kermit sword fighting with Tim Curry. Now, that whole sequence was mammoth in so much as that Kermit had all these blue puppeteers all around him that was operating, and and Tim Curry was going, what? Now, they were supposed to have supplied us with a clean plate. The problem with the clean plates is there were bloody chickens everywhere. Now, real chickens on the plate. Now, it's not a clean plate. So I had to go through and we had to get rid of all of these chickens. But then there was this situation where I was invited and he said, this is the first time he's ever done it. Brian Henson's going to operate Kermit. And he's going to loop the loop. He's going to somersault. And it was Brian Henson operating him, not the puppeteers. So he did most of that. That was a tough one to do because motion blur was difficult in those days. But we did that. And then I was asked, well, I wasn't asked, I just went on the sets. And there was this sequence with Tim Curry doing a song, When You're a Professional Pirate. Being honest and brave and sincere, all of that. And that was about 15, 20 takes. And I just was fascinated. I liked Tim Curry. He was a professional, very nice man. But what I always remember, and then I went to rushes or dailies every time after that, is that Rizzo the Rat and Gonzo used to do the slates, and they were ad-libbing all the time. So they were then chatting about it. It was hysterical. And you know what? They were professionals. Again, I go back to the days of the Muppet Show. Unbelievable professionals, but they were ad-libbing. And then, you know, Brian Henson, right, one for fun. Right, let's do the one for fun. And that was the one that was always used, was the last take. But if only they'd release these shots before at the beginning and at the end of the takes with Gonzo and Rizzo, you believe them. You absolutely believe they were real. And it was like that with all of it. You know, and Tim Curry, because they replayed his music all the time, so that was on a recorded track. So he was saying so many times. He was a very professional. And then the following day when we used to go to dailies, and again, I was fortunate enough to be invited to go to dailies there at Shepperton Studios. It was like a family. It was like a family. There was no stress. People were just enjoying it and they were laughing, and there was this because they'd done all their work prior to that. They made sure that those shots were set up correctly and all of that. Now, it was incredible, but I did have, you know, you're saying about counselling on Return to Oz. Now, I had a major issue on this because I loved the Muppet characters, and I saw the most shocking, and I'll never forget it now, imagery. Is the Muppets were taken to their Winnebago, their caravan, overnight for storage. The poor Miss Piggies and Gonzos and Kermit were trussed up upside down. It's like they'd hung them.
Oh.
And I'll never forget those images because they're dead. They're dead. They're completely dead. You know, and then the next day you go on set and it was shocking to see them like that because you never see them
literally
like
make me cry right now. I'm like, oh, they're not dead. Oh.
It is weird.
It's traumatizing.
Seen stuff with the Muppets, and they'll do interviews like with the wall of Muppets behind them, and it's like, why isn't Scooter moving?
I know. It's a sock. These are socks, for God's sake. I don't know how they do it. It's unbelievable. I actually saw it was a bloody good documentary, the Jim Henson documentary that it was on Disney Plus. I thought that was amazing. It was quite teary actually watching it. Again, it's how they do it, you know. And I go back to when I saw the Muppet Show being filmed, and the stage was up high, performers are down there, but they had a monitor, black and white monitors. And they were looking at the monitors, and I was looking down like that, and then looking up like that, down like that, up like that, down like that. And it was just unbelievable.
I will ask before we move on from Muppet Treasure Island, since you worked with basically the Jim Henson Company 3 times, How was it to be involved in that world of
Loved
Jim
it.
Henson's?
Loved it. Loved it because I socialized with them a lot. You know, in the evenings when we were in Soho, I used to go. We used to go to a bar in. Oh God, it's gone ages ago. In the Frith Street, there was a bar in Frith Street, and we always used to. And I used to go out with. At that time, Jin Valou took over the supervising, and he was from Ireland originally. He took over from Tom Smith, and I used to socialize with him, and then John Stevenson from Henson's, and Pete Coogan as well. And we did so much socializing, and we went to as well one of these silent movies. I can't remember what, Thief of Baghdad or something. It was with a live musical orchestra at the Royal Festival Hall. I remember going with all of them there. And what that show did, because remembering the visual effects companies, when they became CGI, were quite rivals, and so you didn't normally intermingle with them. What Henson's did on Muppets brought everybody together. So you socialized with the other facilities as well. I got really good credit on that. I was really proud of that credit on Muppet Treasure Island. But just going back one more to the Muppet Christmas Carol. Now, CFC did most of that work, but there's a couple of sequences we did. One of it, now Derek Meddings was a guy that did Thunderbirds, did Moonraker, did a lot of space sequences, and he was known for incredibly good matte paintings and everything. And we had this massive rotating barrel, which was probably about 15 foot wide, and it was painted of the Earth on it, or the moon or whatever. And all of Derek's shots of the moon or the Earth were always at a diagonal, and it was stepperized. So he used to do all of this in camera on set of the Earth and everything. Now there was this one scene where Kermit had to be walking, strolling down the street with, I think, Bob Cratchit, whatever the tiny character is. And he was and he's walking on snow. Now that is Derek's Barrel Earth. We painted it white and gave it texture, and we rotated that around on set. And he wasn't going anywhere. Kermit wasn't going anywhere. He was just but it looked like he was actually walking and moving along the snowy road. But yeah, that's a bit of trivia there. So that was used on various Bond movies, on Superman, on Thunderbirds, and it was used on Muppet Christmas Carol.
You guys have questions? I know, Helena, you haven't been able to say much about Electric Dreams or The Neverending Story 2 or any other films that Alan's worked on.
Well, for Christ's sake, I've got your list of credits up here, and there's just so many things off to the side, like Kroll, Company Wolves, Electric Dreams, Life Force, Return to Oz, Young Sherlock Holmes, Labyrinth, Aliens, Little Shop of Horrors, Dream Demon, Fish Called Wanda, Cure for Wellness, Good Omens. I mean, there's just so many. Yeah, I mean, Electric Dreams is one of my favorites. I know it's probably not one of the more like fantastical ones, but like as a kid, like I really loved Electric Dreams. And the thing that I always heard was that they had Bud Cort like off to the side, like in a box, doing the lines for the computer, which I thought was crazy. Well, the rest of the actors don't say. Like, can you talk about that just a little bit? I mean, we can just cover it for a second.
I can talk about that a lot more than I can on some of the other shows I've done.
Okay.
Right. Electric Dreams was very special to me. I came of age that time because that's when I actually passed my driving test. And I was enabled then to actually drive to London for the first time to attend the cast and crew screening. And I was able to drive myself to the cutting rooms as well. Prior to that, on the show, again, that was posted at Twickenham Studios and people that I knew. Now, Electric Dreams, it was at that time I was going through a phase at GSE of probably, well, possibly wanting to move along to another company. So Fred Chandler gave me a bit of a pay rise, and he said, "Look, I'm going to give you this show, and it's all yours." you deal with it completely, you know. So if you want artwork drawn up, you get the art department to do it. You need animation, you get that sorted. You deal with the customer, you deliver it, and all of that. Now, the reason why GSE got this show was there was, unfortunately, he passed away, and he was a delightful man, such a big producer. His name was Larry DeWay. Now, Larry DeWay, the producer, was based at Pinewood, and he was also a Bonding future prior to him dying. And he also produced Hunt for Red October. Again, this was the days of you were getting regular work from your regular clients. So he gave us Electric Dreams. So Electric Dreams was interesting because you had to come up with ideas on this, because it was you know, and the sequences were quite long because they were going in line with the music. So you had so the sequences were quite long to do, and the first thing I did, which, believe it or not, was quite tough, was the jigsaw piece that was mixing a montage sequence that was mixing it, to the orchestra where Grease 2. You like that guy, don't you? What's his name in Grease 2?
Maxwell Caulfield.
Yeah, very good looking chap. So he was in there, and Virginia Madsen, and you know, was all of that was going on. And I think she's you know, an incredible lady as well. Amazing looks. And I like Lenny von Dolan. God, yeah, I had a crush on him. But anyway, so I absolutely took that seriously. So I did this montage sequence of the jigsaw element. So we shot that element because there was a lot of filming off monitors as well, and then superimposing that over the background. But you were given the music tracks on that show to make it work, because talking about that synchronizer with your various film elements, you had a load of film elements for Electric Dreams. So you had the soundtrack, which was a magnetic soundtrack, 35 mils, and you were running it backwards and forwards, and you were trying to, excuse me, hitting certain cues with things. Now, they loved it. It took a long time to do it. It was quite fussy. It was quite a tricky show. And then I was given the sequence where I think Edgar had these disco lights or something, and you were looking from outside.
Yeah, where he's throwing like his pity party in the house. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, and you've got all the Venetian blinds in the window, and all of those imagery is mine. I did all of that imagery. With all that, and it was just like, go to town, go mad. And so I did that sequence as well, and I also did a load of other opticals in the show, but it was I think I did about 40 shots on that. But it was, again, it was a film that, you know, it was for me, it's like coming of age in the film industry. You know, I've got the trust from people. And right, go on, there's a show, do it all yourself. Now, I know another company did a few more effects, and the film was very problematic in the end, because I think there were licensing laws problems with Virgin and whatever. I think it was Virgin that released it, Virgin Pictures, Richard Branson. But it was absolutely fantastic. And again, this was the first time I drove into London on my own in my Triumph Dolomite car on a Sunday morning to go to the Odeon Haymarket, long gone, that cinema, to the cast and crew screening. And I didn't have anyone to share it with, but I went there on my own with my one ticket, and I saw my work. And I loved it, because that film was a happy film. It wasn't nasty. It was fantasy. It was working on the film was hugely enjoyable as well. And again, I go back to the days, and a lot of these shows in the 80s, you either love working on them or hate them. There's nothing in between. Now, that's the reason why is you have one producer. You don't have 8 or 10 producers, which you do nowadays. So then when you have that, you could have 2 bad pennies within that, you know, and everyone has an agenda with those people. In those days, you had a director, whether it's Neil Jordan, whether it's you know, Steve Barron, whether it's whatever, you know, or John Borman or Polanski, or whatever, all of these people. But you have one producer, like the Bonds, Cubby Broccoli, who answered to Cubby, and the director and the editor. That's it. So it was a lot easier then. And you would, if you did a good job, you almost guarantee getting the next show. Now, Electric Dreams did For me, I absolutely loved it, and I thought, where the hell did it go? Because it didn't really get the release it should have got. Now, I believe it was to do with something to do with the music rights or something like that. Um, and I think Virgin played an important part on that. And again, I hark on about the days when I worked on 1984. That was a Virgin movie, and I remember I was in my camera room, Simon Perry, the producer, having this huge shouting match down the phone to Richard Branson in my room, because Richard Branson was wanting to put music tracks on it, and he wanted to put the Eurythmics song on it, and put a load of Eurythmics music. And the George Orwell 1984, which was directed by Mike Radford, really didn't go down well. It, to this day, when I see the movie, it doesn't jam. So the Richard Branson situation was ideal for Electric Dreams, because it was a musical fantasy. And who would ever known that Together in Electric Dreams, I hear that at least twice a week on the radio to this day. It's I did some imagery on a Boy George one. I can't the Boy George songs in there as well.
The Dream.
That's it, yeah. The Dream, yeah,
The
yeah.
soundtrack, just
Like Alice in Wonderland, that. Yeah, it's a great movie, and I again I wish when people say, "Oh, what's Electric Dreams?" they think of the show that was on a few years ago.
Sure.
No, it's this one. There was this, there was that, and believe it or not, a lot of it was shot. Most of it was shot in America, but it was all post-produced in the UK. Post-production was at Twickenham Studios. So it was, and the interior sets were at Twickenham
San
as well.
Francisco, but I'm like, wait, but it's also got this huge, and then you got Miriam Margolyes showing up and all that kind of stuff. So
yes, you do. Yeah. Oh,
I will
God, yeah.
say my last question is just, and then my co-host can ask you whatever they want to ask you about all your countless films that you've done, is that I love The Never-Ending Story too, because of the colors and because of the sets, and because I feel like it's more full of life than the first one. And so when I first met you, I was like, oh my God, you have a picture of Zaide on your table. And I just wanted to commend you for The Never-Ending Story too. I thought it was visually stunning.
Oh, thank you. You're about but it's interesting because when you mention you work on Never-Ending Story too. Now I found that really interesting. It was hugely political. I was really involved in that because I left General Screen Enterprises to work for Derek Meddings on this show for Never-Ending Story 2. And I was set about giving three optical effects to put together as a little test while I was on my 3-month trial, and that was the Orin glow. Hence, I've got the Orin. The Horrocks Castle, the laser beam effects on Horrocks Castle, and what was the other thing? And there was the matte painting shot where she goes 1, 2, 3 in the hand, which was my shot. Goes. So, and I passed with flying colours, and I got a bottle of champagne. Now, little did I know at that point, they just got rid of George Miller. Dieter Geiser got rid of George Miller. The Snowy River, George Miller. And so Dieter came over to the UK and he said, look, work with, and I knew the editor, Chris Blunden and Peter Hollywood. And they said, to us, and there are only about 5 of us that are in this massive creative environment. We're having our own stage, having motion control camera, having a massive blue screen, having animatronics, model unit stuff, model shops. Right, and this is what I'm saying about ILM are the only people that do it. Not at all. We had to finish the film. And the film was a bit of a mess, to be honest. So we had to create certain sequences. So we had to create like the smirk. There's a photograph of me. I think you saw James with me with the smirk on my shoulder as well. So we quickly had to build this character, which didn't really look like the character that was on the set. But we did a stop frame puppeteer, Sebastian, could chase it. He wasn't chasing it at that point. It was just cutting and there was nothing there. So we had to create that sequence. And those plates that you saw were of the Dolomites. So I did 95% of all of the visual effects opticals on that show. and it was a major task, and it was a challenge. And we had no director, we had two editors, and the trust from Dieter Geisler. What I did like about Neverending Story 2 is it's quite arty in Fantasia. It's like when you look at Return to Oz and compare that to Wizard of Oz. You know, when you look Fantasia and there are all these moving their arms, and it's very visual. It's like ballet. It's like opera. It's high camp. Now, that's totally different to the other Fantasia, and I just compare that sequence for like Return to Oz and Wizard of Oz. Now, I think what won it for me, I didn't like the junior rock biter, but what I did absolutely thought was fantastic was Zaida, Clarissa Burt. I don't know where she ended up. I don't know what she did after and everything, but she was utterly brilliant. You know, and I did I never met her, but I did a load of work to make her more menacing, which was that one with the makeup, where she put the makeup on her face because she had no face on it. Now that I didn't like that at all. I had to take away all her features, and we shot her hands against blue screen. She was doing that, so her hands were separate to her face plates. And then Peter Chang, my mate Changy, who did the animation for the Robin on Little Shop of Horrors, did this. You can always tell Peter Chang's animation because his lightning has got curves on it. That's one thing. See, when you saw, you know, the Vancouver bit with the lightning, I'm not a fan of his lightning, but yeah, it was Clarissa Burt's Aida was brilliant, and I've got some memory board. Yeah, I had to design this memory ball sequence as well. They said, right, we've got a memory ball sequence. What's it look like, Alan? I said, well, I don't know yet. So they gave me the raw film element. And if you saw it, it's got a diffuse look, but it's also got you cannot focus on the specific object. So in other words, it's color, but you see different images offset, like a green image, a red image, and a blue image. I turned the sequence into black and white, and then I put color light through different color separations and made it color again, but I knocked it slightly out. So when you see a film that was originally shot in the 50s or 60s, when it went through that process of before safety film, I'm getting technical here, but they used to archive film on red, green, and blue, black and white masters, and then put it together, and then you get your final color element. I went back to the old traditional days, and I did a lot of my composites that way because the contrast was better, because the stops that I was given in the 80s wasn't very good on that show. But I then created this dream sequence for the memory balls. And where it goes out of focus is where you can see the different colors separating.
I love that.
But I did 143 shots on that one.
Well, it's visually beautiful. I have two questions I'll save to the end, but for my fabulous co-host, do you have questions or comments for Alan about any of his diverse work he's done?
You mentioned Dream Demon. Do you know about that film as well?
I know about that film. Yeah, that's one. I need to rewatch it. It's been many years, but someone had just, someone had just recently done a YouTube video on it, and I was like, "Ooh, that tickles a memory. I need to go see that one." But yeah, I don't want to take up all your time. Yeah.
Well, listen, we can reconvene another time if you want to hear more stories.
Totally. I think Polly and I would be like,
yeah. No,
but I want to give like John and Darren and Edie's and Mary a chance as well, because otherwise we're just going to be like,
I'm so sorry. I do talk a lot. But James, you do put me in my place. I like about you. You right. Okay, moving along. Yeah.
I will say this as a former newspaper reporter. I'd rather have people overtalk than undertalk. So,
exactly.
I actually have a question in regards to, because you just brought up like lightning and how like someone had like their own style of doing lightning. At the time when you were doing this kind of work, I know that like some special effect houses were known for very specific looks. Did you ever put in like your own kind of like personal, like 100%. I guess signature to how you wanted your composites and your special effects to look? That you could
100%.
What I'm for.
Yes, 100%. It's very interesting because it was going to be a continual conversation, perhaps another time. But when you were an optical cameraman, you shot things slightly differently to other people, depending on your techniques or what you invented in your own room. Now, I did a load of titles, and one in particular was a problematic one, and that was Life Force. Now, I did several versions of that title sequence. Now, the worst thing you can do is having red titles on a green background. So, and what the director wanted, and with Space Vampires, Life Force, I did various sequences, and there's so many different versions out there at the moment. I did one version where there were red titles on a green background, i.e., inside the alien spaceship, and it was all green, or in space, and then you had the Halley's Comet thing, and it was all greeny yellow. And when you were in the craft itself with Steve Railsback and all of that, it was red, and they wanted green titles on that. Now, when you cross colorize on an optical, you get through a point of it goes white. Now, I had my own little trick of doing that, of stopping that by holding back various max and using a different fade mechanism, which you shouldn't be using at the time. And I did that. But with Neverending Story 2, for example, it was an absolute pig, real pig. But I was so proud of this one. Falcor, when you shoot Falcor against blue screen, you see a pale blue behind the fur on the edges. Now that shows up as a black semi-transparent blobs behind the hair. Now I created a method of eradicating that. Now it was, again, this is technical, but that fringing I put together with the opposite matte, and I created another matte which just then highlighted that bit. And by doing a wedge exposure of that, I found the right point where it just disappears. So the exposure then knocks it out. But it was an additional way. So all these, I had little techniques. And when I used to do fade and dissolves, quite often you see on some films, when you fade out a title, which is on a background, you see it dip, the background dip. I created my own little technique for that. Now, ILM, did some very good work on Star Wars and everything, but I remember a friend of mine, Chris Yarn, she was visual effects editor on Neverending Story 2, but she worked on Enemy Mine, and ILM did work, and they used to call ILM incredibly large matte lines. So ILM did have problems. Now, all I can say is that ILM, and there's that bloody good documentary. I've only recently got Apple Plus, that documentary about ILM, and it's got, I can relate to nearly all of that. But it wasn't just them, as you were saying. I worked on, I did some Indiana Jones, Star Trek 2, Star Trek 4, all of these shows. Krull, Gun Bus was another massive film, Gun Bus, which was shot in VistaVision format. Alien 3 I worked on. All of these shows. And we were given on some of the big shows, you had to shoot components. What do you do? The premiere's coming and all of this. So I can relate to everything they said, and they did some incredible stuff and development on when it came into the CGI world. But we did it too. We did it too. And there would be a time that I would love to do some sort of documentary, and I should really do it at my age.
I told you that you have so many stories and you have so much memorabilia. You should tour or do some sort of exhibit.
No, I need people like you, all of you, to encourage me more and more. I have got a ghostwriter now doing a book, so I've done quite a few hours of that, of my career, but he's now delving into my personal life just to make it a bit more interesting. So I'm getting a bit scared.
Don't worry.
No,
I only have 2 questions, but how about the rest of you guys? Do you guys have any more questions about Alan's work and his films?
So, first of all, you worked on looking at your IMDb page, you worked on a lot of great films that I think are incredibly underrated, like Young Sherlock Holmes was mentioned. the Vietnam film Hamburger Hill, which has a
Oh,
young
Hamburger Hill. That's another one. I did all the work. Peter Tanner, brilliant editor. We did a load of work for him and John Irving. Yeah.
and yeah, that I think that's a phenomenal film. But one in particular, since we mentioned one Christmas Carol that you worked on, you also worked on the Christmas Carol from I believe it was 1984 with George C. Scott.
Oh, George C. Scott, yes, and
Yeah.
Lucy Gutteridge. Yeah.
And one of my personal favorite actors, David Warner, the late great David Warner. So, do you have any
Yes, yeah.
involving that film in particular?
Yeah, that was an interesting one because, but again, we were a rival company to another company called Optical Film Effects, and it was an Optical Film Effects were known for doing the Superman films. Roy Field had it, and we were quite a rival, and we were like they were based at Pinewood, and we were 4 miles east going towards London in a place called Uxbridge in Middlesex. Now, we I can't remember, was it? God, entertainment partners or something. I remember that I did the logo. First of all, there was this distributor logo, which was a and it was and it was like entertainment something or other, or it was like a yellow title over black. And that's how we got in to do some work on it. And so we did that animated logo, and we ended up doing the titles for the show, and we did some of the matte shots going down the street, matte painting shots. Now, I love Christmas then. I was a child then in a way. I'm not a lover of Christmas so much now because all the people that you loved during that period, like your family, a lot of them have gone, and it turns in from being the best time of your life to not a brilliant time of your life. And I'd never have children anyway. But it's Christmas for me was working on a film like that like Christmas Carol actually, but Muppet Christmas Carol, but this one in particular, Christmas Carol, I thought it was very good and it had a good cast. Now the problem with that is
Hades and Mary and I interviewed the two composers for that film because they did the never seen musical Facelift from 1984, which is a very weird musical. So they did that before Christmas Carol. So
really?
Yeah, it was they went from Facelift to A Christmas Carol, which is like night and day. Before I ask my questions, do you guys have any other musings or praise do you want to lump upon Alan? We'll let everybody, all the co-hosts, say one thing before we close out. Who would like to go first?
Please go, and please put Hades and Mary up on the screen so we can see their fantastic cosplay. Because you got Seymour and you got, the dentist, and it's like, come on.
And did you know what? I'd still like to say the effort that you've gone into, it's me with a cap, sorry, and I've got my posters up on the wall. I've got a little Shop of Horrors quad as well, so, in storage at the moment. But and it's a bit dark now. God, it's getting dark outside. But I think what your costumes, the efforts of what you put behind your images of you, I take my hat off to you. And
wait till you see Darren's performance of Little Shop that he did specifically for you. It's Darren did performed as Audrey, and I'll send it to you.
Oh, if you could, that'd be brilliant. I'll tell you what, you bring me out of my shell, all of you, because I've done all of these shows, right? And I believe it or not, I was a very, very shy person until a guy called Gareth Owen pushed me in front of everybody at a Bond Stars event at Pinewood, because I've got 6 hours of me shooting the titles with the ladies and everything, and me firing guns and whatever. And he wanted to show that. Now I had all these big like Britt Eklund, Honor Blackman, all on stage doing their talks, and then they said, right, now it's me. But I'd had one little drink beforehand, so that gave me more confidence. And I just had everybody laughing because you start. I like laughter. I like enjoying things, and you've made me smile, all of you, with what you've got, and what you put on. But the thing is that I was hearing all these stories when I was in Barbados, when I've done this, when I've done that. So I just went up on stage at Pinewood. And I said, you've heard all of these stories in the most glamorous of locations, and which they are on Bond movies. Well, we've shot the titles, which are in theory the most glamorous part of a Bond movie, but we shot them behind the Grand Union Canal in a warehouse in freezing cold February. No glamour there. And then it got laughter. And that laughter I home into, and I do home into that sort of thing. But I'm now in a situation like I did yesterday at License to Kill Screen. I've got a lot to share. I believe I have now, and I'm a massive film buff, and I fought to get in the industry, and I'm exactly, the same. I've got posters everywhere. I've kept everything, cans of film, orders, please carry out this work on return to us. I keep it all. And it's so nice to share it because there aren't many people like us that I can talk to because I work in the professional field and it's not as like this. And now
Well, you
with
say you
CGI,
have, you
people
say you
don't
don't have
know.
kids. We're all up for
Mm.
adoption. So put us
Well,
in your
Well,
will, whatever. We're happy to take care of your collections.
have you
And
ever
when
that's
we
so
wanted to?
sweet.
ever host, hopefully one day when we host one of these musicals, we would love to do like a Q&A with you. Polly, Hades, and
Yeah.
Mary, and Darren, do you guys
Mm.
have any other questions? Because John asked about the other film that he did. I forgot what it was. What film? Oh, Christmas Carol. So Polly, Hades, and Mary, and Darren, and Helena.
I mean, I really don't have any more questions. I'd love to just continue the conversation on all the technical nerdy stuff here, but I guess that's for another time. But yeah, I mean, your
Yeah.
career just, I mean, again, looking at your IMDb, it's really just like the kind of career that I would love to have had. Like you've worked
Oh,
with
thank you.
such amazing directors and
Mm.
on
Mm.
great projects that,
Mm.
clearly we're talking about that have legs that, still are still being seen. I mean, the fact that you brought up License to Kill having a 35th anniversary, that makes me feel so old. Like I remember like it was one of the first times as a kid going to a movie theater. It was either Batman or License to Kill James Bond, and we ended up seeing Batman because License to Kill is
Mm.
one of the darkest James Bond movies, and I don't think I was ready for it.
It's incredible. It's
It's so good.
unbelievable now.
It's so good.
And I paid particular. I was mad on doing the gun barrel from a child. Didn't know what it was. 1972, I saw my first Bond movie, Doctor No and Thunderball, Double Bill, and I wanted to do the titles and the gun barrel. And I managed to do the last traditional set before CGI came on board. But what I did is I went back to the original components of the surround. And now, if you look at the License to Kill and compare it to the previous ones, you'll
Yeah.
see the quality of my one. Bloody good. And you see his face. You see his face. I don't freeze Tim. He
Yeah.
moves around slightly with the gun, and you see the smoke. And my hand's in the titles. I'm a Bond girl as well. My hand's in
I'll
the
have to
titles.
rewatch. Really?
No, I had to wear a long black silk glove because they wouldn't let the ladies fire the gun. I had to then fire the gun and the superimpose. I tell you what, let's carry this on another time because and I have more questions if you want because I just like sharing the information and I'll get some photographs next time.
I would love to be a Bond girl. That's all I'm gonna say.
I'm a Bond girl, and I was in
Darren.
Playboy. I was in Playboy, the centerfold, but it's only a headshot of me. Now I can actually say I was in Playboy, but not naked. I was operating focus, but yeah, there's a lot of stories about the Playboy connection with License to Kill as well, and the actress who was in the Bond movie, and she was going out with a Playboy photographer, hence she was in the titles. She's not a good dancer, so we had to shoot at 120 frames a second. So she was, Anyway.
I just want
Darren
to
can
say
help you
I
be a
loved your
volunteer.
I loved
Sorry?
your work on. That's okay. I loved your work on Little Shop, and it was really
Thank you.
inspiring. And for the special effects overall, there is something missing from CGI. Like you can watch
Yes.
these movies in the 80s, and it's more real.
Yeah.
So I'm with
It's
you on that.
organic.
What it takes
It's
to do that
organic.
is incredible.
Yeah.
It was just
Mm.
all your movies are great. Everything you worked on,
Well,
and obviously we're really
oh.
inspired by stuff. We also did a shadow cast. That was great.
I tell you what, I get very teary on that because it's music to my ears because to this day, like me and my partner, we do the same job. We shoot as much as we can for real, and when we can, we use miniatures and use CGI as a tool, not as the main tool to carry out the effects work. CGI is you can't touch it. Now I'm very touchy-feely. Now we've built miniatures and models for a Highlander movie. We've done everything we can do for real. We shoot. It's like explosions. We don't generate them. I go and shoot film explosions. I film real water plates and things like that. Now, there aren't many of us left. You know, I've been in the industry since 1981. Now I'm 60. But I've got a lot more life in me and this, and you know, and I just recently finished A Tattooist of Auschwitz, which is a heavy film to do. But what I did, I was being coerced to use virtual production, like these awful Star Wars shows now, which is all shot on a stage with a big screen behind it, and it's already imagery behind it, which is CGI. Now, that's proving problematic, and because there's huge investment. But I don't do that. I shoot blue screen, I shoot green screen, I shoot real elements, and I use CGI as a tool. As far as I'm concerned, if you use CGI as much as a lot of these directors, they will then give you these weird and wacky camera moves, and it doesn't become real. And it's you know, you've got Audrey too. You know, you've got the plot in front of it. This, you know, we're interacting, you know, with Edgar and you know and Oz behind it and all of that. These were characters you could touch, apart from Edgar, but you could still touch the monitor. It was just you know. So I do treasure what you've said with great fondness, and I will continue to do this and do it my way. Although there's a
Thank
lot
you
of
for
people
keeping
that
it
like to
real,
do it the other way.
literally.
Mm.
Yeah, and you
I
know,
like
we
it.
were watching The Neverending Story last night. My son's first time watching it, and he's like, "Why does it look so real?" You know what
See?
I
Oh, you're
mean?
kidding
Like,
me. You're kidding
yeah,
me.
yeah,
Oh,
and
that's
I'm like, well, it's
fantastic.
a fantasy film, and it's just how it was made. Like they used fans to blow the fur around. Like there's a lot going on here, a lot more than you don't see that makes it so
Yeah.
magical. You know, and so
You
my
touch it,
son,
you can
like,
see it, you can interact. Yeah,
yeah,
you can
you know,
interact with it, you know?
exactly. You feel you look like you could go walk over and hug Falcor. You know, like that's
Yeah,
it's
Well,
so
you
you
can
cool.
do.
can. You can.
It's,
He's
Yeah,
in
where
Germany
is
and
Falcor these days? Not
he's
karate. I hope.
he's in the Bavarian. My friend lives in Bavaria, but
oh,
he's
he's in
in
the
the
studio there, isn't
Bavarian.
he?
He's in the
Mm,
Bavarian
mm,
film studios, and he looks like a dog
mm.
with mange at the moment because of how many people have ridden him. So you can ride Falcor.
And there's one over in the US too
I
that was in
worked
the
there for number
summer.
two.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Bavaria? Yeah.
Mm.
Helena and
Yeah,
Darren?
Oh, I was gonna say, so there is a Falcor over here too. They found him in a storage unit. And
Yeah.
so there's one over here, and I'm trying to figure out where they're gonna take it because it's like, go put this somewhere so we can touch on it, you know?
Ridiculous. A damn storage unit. That is like
What a
Audrey too.
disrespect.
He probably
Mm.
looks better than how Hoggle looked when they found him.
Oh, Hoggle, poor Hoggle. Oh my God, that was a
Yeah, the
Mm,
Hoggle
mm,
Force.
nightmare
I love
mm.
that.
fuel. I mean, talk about how Alan was talking about how you have that disbelief of seeing the Muppets like put away and hanging upside down. When you see Hoggle just decayed and melted, it's just
Horrible. It's
oh.
horrible. It's like Audrey too. You know, it's like the plant as well.
Yeah.
It's just I told him I don't know how long we got. I'm just going to turn the light on. You can't see me.
And then
I've always-
Darren, and then I'll ask my question. But Helena, ask your question, then Darren, and then I'll ask a
Oh,
question.
I mean, while Alan is running for the light, just an amazing career full of amazing movies, and I'm gonna go rent Dream Demon from the video store around the corner as soon as we're done here and go watch it.
Helena and Darren with a question, and then I'll ask your question, Alan.
Darren, go ahead.
I don't have a question. It's more of this has been refreshing to have this conversation with you because we haven't had to ask you any questions. You are just been very forthcoming
I'm
with.
sorry. Yeah.
No.
Don't apologize. It's great.
100% answered any question that I would have had and then expounded upon them. And I did want to share one story about the that DVD ending that you said, the footage that you said that you had that you weren't allowed to tell anybody, because I have a story about that. The ending, the movie ending always felt a little odd to me. And so when I moved to New York in my early 20s, I had a friend that told me, you know, the DVD is coming out and word has it that there's going to be extras on the end of it. He got a copy of the DVD and it was the scene that you talked about with the urchins in the background with the American flag, but it was all in black and white. And then there was like a couple
That's it.
and it
That's
didn't
it.
make sense. And David
Yeah.
Geffen lost his mind because there was no sound, and he's like, this isn't the correct thing. So he did like a massive recall and made all of the stores return the DVDs, and there were only like a box of them available on eBay. So I remember there was like a copy of it for like $400, and I was like, I'm just not meant to see this. And then Blu-ray came out, and I just happened to be watching it, and I was like, wait a minute, the shots look different, the things like I don't remember things being this crisp. And then that whole 21-minute ending came, and I was like, this is what I've been missing for the last 30 years of my life. You know what I mean? So I just thought, and then I go, where has this been? Where has this been hiding? And then to find out that you're the one that's had it this whole time and couldn't say anything, I'm just like, okay, very interesting. And then
I didn't have the negative, but what I had was a VHS copy. Now I had a rough copy. This is really naughty, but it wasn't. I was given this obviously by Paul Wilson. It was copied off the Steenbeck machine, the editing machine. So it was absolutely crap quality. But that's all I had, and it was. It had all the Chinograph cue marks for the sounds, you know, and all the editing marks on there. Now I had to live with that for many years. And then I heard of all this fight going on, and I'm sure I had that DVD, and it was only NTSC. It was only Region 1 of that, and it was black and white. I think it was a black and white bit. Now, of course, then they spent money on doing it for the Blu-ray. No, the director's cut and everything. But I tell you one thing: that to this day has still got some of the best miniature work I've ever seen on any film. Now, I don't think CGI could ever do anything like that, and I really hope that they don't remake Little Shop of Horrors using a CGI Audrey 2. And
No, they're gonna at some point, and we're gonna just be outside just like, fuck you.
Yeah, well, I'll be there too. Just remember what they did, how they sank up Rick Moranis singing to the plant that was undercranked because they couldn't get the lip sync movement so quickly because that model, you know, the Audrey 2 puppet was so big. So in order to get the lips going that quickly, they had to undercrank to about, I don't know, was it like 16 frames a second or something? So it sped that up. So Rick Moranis had to go slow on set while the other thing was, you know, it's unbelievable. And that's what I say about Frank Oz. He was a perfectionist. Absolute perfectionist. That show, and it was a musical, so they were singing as well, lip sync, the puppet sing, unbelievable. If you put that down on paper and you go to a distributor now or a financier, they'll say, "What? You can do it CGI, but you can't do it the traditional way." They wouldn't allow it. It'd be too much hassle. Brilliant, good technicians.
And I just want to go back to what the ladies were saying about how things look so real. And I think that is absolutely the thing about all of these different movies that we keep touching on. I'm like, that movie from my childhood. Oh, yeah, that movie too. And it's like, well, what is the common thing from all of these? They all look so real. And then to hear you say that you are the one that worked on that chicken coop scene in Return to Oz, that's like the inciting whole moment of the whole movie. She gets in this chicken coop, like the whole idea that you've got Dorothy in a mental institution, and then she escapes in a chicken coop and goes back to Oz is crazy. But that whole chicken coop was so scary, and I kept asking my father, how does this happen? Where are they filming this? And he just kept going, it's special effects. And I'm like, no, this looks real. And then to hear you say that it was actually special effects and that they weren't actually out in a raging storm, my jaw is on the floor. So that's what I'm saying. I don't have a question. I just want to listen to
So on that scene, and it's quite an interesting one. I was given a plate. So there's a traditional matte painting of the sea plague, you know, and that, you know, that. So you had a plate that was shot on a tank at the studio, and then that was matched with Fairuza and the chicken coop and everything. And then in the background, you've got a matte painting, which was a traditional glass matte painting. So I comped that together. That was troublesome because you know it's trying to bring life into the matte painting in the background when there's so many ripples and everything in the foreground. But yeah, that was a tough one to do. But then, of course, what scared the shit out of me, well, it didn't scare me, but I just thought it was really, my God, this is quite dramatic, was the organ music when Jean March fell into the water as well. and then 6 track magnetic sound, you know, and 70mm blow up. It was unbelievable. I did a load of the flashes and all of that, and then I brought the water ripples through, you know, and and also I did the glitter on the ruby slippers. When I did one thing I didn't like on that was I had to add a load of glints to it, and it was sped up. And it was just sped up too much, and I didn't like doing that. Oh, and License to Kill, that bloody lizard. I had to add all those glints, and that was because Cartier had a tie-in with that. And I submitted some really subtle glints on that iguana lizard of the villains. But that was sent off to I think it was Cartier, I'm sure it was them, and they wanted it over the top and bright because they were financing some of the film. Anyway, you know.
So when they have the headphones that they're going to put on her, did you do the lightning that they show between the headphones? Because that really
no, I didn't.
That fucked me up hard.
No, I was not okay. The rest of my life, I wasn't okay.
Not okay. I mean, I could just imagine the studio execs going in pitching this movie. It's like Frank Cross from Scrooged. I always say it's like, you know, the day the reindeer cried, you know, from Scrooged. It's like we're just gonna do a giant line of blow down this boardroom table. We're just gonna start at one end, we're gonna go to the other. And that's how it came to be. I'm just saying.
That's how that works.
I didn't add any of that, but I tell you what, I remember the noise of the wheelers going down the corridor and everything. And that music, David music was funny. Quickly before I forget, now because I want to see Walter Murch, you know, doing the rounds, and it's about editing the traditional way. So exactly what we're talking about now, all of that, and I have a huge respect for Walter Murch, and he's showing his film around the country, and one of it's up in St Albans. Now, I didn't know, and I've got it now, and I haven't watched it yet. He's got Remembering Return to Oz website. Now, I don't know if you know that. Now, he's got 2 hours plus of interviews with Brian Henson, some of the characters from the film, and Walter, describing working on the film. It's cost me $9. It's $9 for a download, and it's mine to buy. Now, I didn't even know that existed until the other day. So I've got a real treat coming up. And Brian Henson's being interviewed, but it's called Remembering Oz, Return to Oz.org or something like that.
I'm going to talk to my therapist, and then I'll go and download it if she says it's okay.
Return to Oz meant a lot to me as a kid. So when I found out, and then John has it as his background, finding out that, you know, because I remember at the convention, they were briefing me on everybody that was there, and they're like, oh, he's worked on the Neverending Story too, and blah, blah. Then they're like, Return to Oz. I was like, oh my God. And I kept asking people that. I remember I asked Jason James Richer, who I had to work with that day, who was next to you. I promise you I'll digress. He was in Free Willy, and he was in the Neverending Story 3. Loveliest guy in the world. I got to work with him all day long.
Sweet? Wasn't he sweet? Yeah.
But he wouldn't tell me any stories about Michael Jackson.
People don't. People won't. Macaulay Culkin won't talk about him.
No, he just said that he was eccentric. That was it. But he was a lovely person. All of them were sweet. My question was, and I will my final question I'll ask after this is, I would love for my co-host one day to watch Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire, and you to talk about it, and maybe I can get Phil Daniels on, who was in it, because he's currently like touring the UK talking about Quadrophenia, the film Quadrophenia. Yeah. So if you ever want to talk about Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire.
What I've got to do on that, James, is something. It's a film that I haven't written down, and I haven't put it on my IMDb. But when you mentioned it, I thought, bloody hell, I worked on that. Now I've got to then start getting my memory skills working. And the way I do that is I check who the editor is, who the producer is, who this is, who that is. Oh, that was at Twickenham, or that was at Pone. Oh, I remember. And it's all these little branches of my memory start coming back. And I remember this and I remember that. But yeah, it was, I think it was Zenith Films now. Yeah, I think it was Zenith Films or something like that.
It's finally getting on DVD and Blu-ray. Not Blu-ray. It might be on Blu-ray, but it's on YouTube to view for free. It's a great musical. It's totally underrated.
But you're saying that, I compare that like that. And yeah, obviously it's a musical in a sense, but I compare that movie to another movie I did called Buster. which was Phil Collins and Julie Waters about the train robbery thing, and it was a very, very British film. And then there's another film called Number One, which was about snooker with Bob Geldof in it. I worked on that. So there's all these little triggers now going off. I'm going to have to look at that and look into that. And
The
I've got the
last
ticket.
question
I've got
I'll
the ticket
ask,
in my drawer.
but yes, everyone, Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire. It's the only vampire pool, like
Snooker,
pool,
pool thing, yeah.
snooker pool, Dracula musical that all takes place inside a studio, like shock treatment. It never leaves the studio. It's all filmed inside.
What great
That was
taste
the
in
only.
taste played together.
Sure, I love it.
It's great, wonderful musical.
Amen.
I'll guess I could wait till John gets back. But who? And this is the only question I ask you, Alan. And you don't have to give us names, but who was the nicest / weirdest or most eccentric celebrity you ever met on the set of any of these movies? Who was the nicest, and who was, I don't want to say meanest because I'm an optimist, but who was the weirdest? So the nicest person, celebrity you met during your time, and one of the weirdest and most eccentric.
Right. The weirdest was Sean Young
Surprise, surprise.
on Kiss Before Dying. She was a nutcase. Absolute nutcase. I don't know how she acted. Well, I don't think she did act very well on it, but she was a nutcase. Seriously, something wrong with that lady. Matt
You're
Dillon
not
was
going to send
charming.
her henchmen out to get us now that you've said that, I hope. I
You
know we had that happen before.
know,
What was she known for? What was Sean? Did she have
She's in
short
Blade
hair?
Runner.
Blade Runner. Blade
Yeah.
Runner.
Blade Runner, Dune.
She's done a few big shows in the 80s and 90s. Now, I worked on
Ace
Kiss
Ventura.
Before Dying.
She also ambushed Tim Burton dressed as Catwoman as her audition to play Catwoman.
And then did it again on TV.
I would say she's been eccentric. That's the best way to say it politely. Now, she scared me. That's all I can say. She just scared me.
Yeah, she's got short hair. I know you're talking about. She's got the short hair.
Yeah. So that's one. And the nicest. Now, there's a movie called Demolition Man. And there's a very, very, very English actor in it who's the villain. And that's Nigel Hawthorne. Now, I worked with Nigel Hawthorne on a movie called The Clandestine Marriage with Joan Collins and Nigel and Timothy Spall. And I did this big model sequence, flood sequence. And the film ran out of money, and he came in with Joan Collins and I like Joan Collins very much as well. But Joan Collins is Joan Collins. But Nigel Hawthorne came in with only to finish the film. So he then had a lot of rights to say how the film was finished in post-production. So me and my partner Simon spent a lot of time with him. And his partner wrote it. Trevor Bentham wrote Clandestine Marriage. And we used to go out to lunch with him in Soho. And he, like I'm telling these stories now, he was telling stories, for example, on Demolition Man. He was this British actor that didn't really have the best agents in America. I'm with William Morris now in America, so I know what they're like now. Agents in America, they are very thorough, very, very thorough. So Nigel Hawthorne was the villain in this Wesley Snipes Stallone movie and Sandra Bullock, and in reality he was quite a big player because he was the villain in the movie. But it was so funny that there was a lot of fighting with agents, with Stallone and Wesley Snipes agents. The point is rolling up the sleeves of the t-shirt so one will show off the muscles more than the other person. How big is your Winnebago, your caravan, all of that. It was the ridiculous waste of stress and money and time when between the two muscle men was absurd. But poor Nigel Hawthorne never got, he got a little mini baby like that. And this was a guy that won, I think, an Oscar in Madness of King George III. But Nigel Hawthorne was the loveliest, the quietest, polite gentleman I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He was charming, absolutely charming, nice man.
And then you got to work with Sean Young.
Mad. But you keep away from her. There was also a thing, you see, with what was it, Robert De Niro on Frankenstein, Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein. You weren't allowed to look at him in the face.
Oh, God. Faye Dunaway. Yeah, you're in my eye line. Don't be in my eye line. You've seen that video?
And
Oh my God.
Tom Cruise with that. I worked on an interview with a vampire as well. It's another one I forgot. It's, with what's his name, Stephen Rea and Tom Cruise. And you weren't allowed to look at Tom Cruise, and he was a difficult man. Most problematic. Sorry, quickly before I go, I worked on a movie Paul Haggis directed called Third Person. There we had Liam Neeson, we had Kim Basinger. Kim Basinger, lovely, delightful lady, so shy. She used to go red when you talked to her. I was in Rome 2013. I worked with Kim Basinger. I did 6 movies in the 80s, but never met her. With her in it, Fall for Love, Blind Date, My Stepmother's an Alien, Never Say Never Again. Those
I
movies.
love that movie.
Which one?
My Stepmother's an Alien.
Yeah. My friend had to take her to the screening of that in London. She's delightful. Kim Basinger, sorry, is delightful. I had the pleasure of working with her in 2013. I tell you who's a complete now, please, no, he isn't. He's a very difficult man. James Franco.
I believe it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. His seat, his director's chair seat wasn't in the position it should have been on a stage at Cinecittà Studios, and because his seat wasn't there, he pretended to play dead. He just collapsed on the floor and just waited for somebody to bring his chair.
Somebody didn't get their chair. Oh,
maybe he was method acting for playing Tommy Wiseau in
I was
Mastermind.
about to say, like, how fitting was it that he played Tommy Wiseau?
He wasn't that great of a Tommy Wiseau, actually.
No.
But I tell
Alan,
you, most
you
of the
have
actors
given us so many stories. You've given us so many stories, and it was kismet to meet you. I was thinking about it. It was such kismet to meet you, and and now I've got to introduce you to all my favorite ghoul fiends. So we definitely want to talk to you again, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again, and we'll look forward to a cease and desist from Sean Young.
Don't forget James Cameron.
wait.
And James Franco.
You see, with all of this, you've got to hand it to the director, James Cameron. He does some big box office hits. But, I also went to the premiere of Titanic, and when it's a 3-hour movie, but when everybody in the audience was waiting 45 minutes for him to turn up, and you had to sit in your seat, and then you had to watch the film. I just find that a little bit rude. But he maybe he's entitled to be like that, but I'm not like that. And but yeah. But there you go. You work with good people. We work with okay people. He is a talented man, but it's not for me. But I would say 90%, 95% of the people I've worked with over the years are really, really nice people. So, but it's the way you talk to them and the way you approach them, and
all of the people that aren't nice are allegedly not nice. That's how we cover ourselves. So all of this is allegedly.
It would appear that, that's what I would say. It would appear that. Yeah. Even Golan and Globus, they were interesting characters.
Oh, I want to hear those stories. Holly, we all want to hear those stories.
I did about 200 odd trailers, and I did a load of canon movies. So I've got a lot of stories about them, including Life Force, Runaway.
A spin-off after the music. Spin-off after the music podcast, you guys, where we talk about this, because this is a thing.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I will send y'all Alan's Instagram profile, and y'all can reach out and continue. But thank you so much, Alan, and hopefully I can see you again in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, it's a pleasure. Honestly, stay in touch. I'd love to do, talk about the horror movies, talk about the comedy, talk about this, talk about anything movies that I've done, but obviously as well about the optical cameras, how things were done in those days. And I'll dig out some photographs this time, and I promise I'll have a poster on the wall next time as well.
Well, brush back up on Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire, and I'll reach out to you about it.
All right, then. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And
thank y'all for
what
thank
you're wearing
everybody for
and
coming.
the effort you've done, is just brings happiness to me. Makes me want to go out and work.
I'll send you Darren's number, and you'll see.
You have to see it. It's so cute.
All right, well, thank you so much, y'all.
Love to you all. All right, and anytime James can organise it, I'm here to talk to you again, and I love it. I absolutely love chatting. All right,
we did.
I'm above.
Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you too.
Lots of love. Take care. Bye bye.
Take care.